The World Health Organization has declared an international health emergency after a deadly Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo killed more than 80 people. Concerns are rising after a confirmed case emerged on Sunday in the eastern city of Goma, controlled by the M23 rebels.
L'épicentre doit être la zone de santé.
The epicenter must be the Mombalu health zone, and then the disease spread to Bunia and Rwampara. And yesterday, from the information I received, there was a case in Goma. It's a woman who was almost certainly infected by her husband.
Welcome to This Week in Africa, your weekly live stream. We talk about all things happening on the continent. We are a little late today, so apologies for that. And but we weekly we talk about all things pertaining to what's happening on the continent. So today we're going to talk about the global health emergency, or well, what's considered a global health emergency, with the Ebola outbreak beginning again, with 88 losing life in DRC, Kagame slamming sanctions, and the U.S. attempting to return and have relations in the Sahel region. Before we get into today's stories, we will start with some introductions. So I'll turn it over to my co-host before I introduce myself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gloria Ayo. I am a founder and host of Diaspora Station, where we basically use culture, news, history to bridge the gap between Africa and its diaspora. And of course, I co-host, and I'm not saying of course like, ooh, in a cocky way, but always honored to co-host This Week in Africa with Joe Hotagwa. Happy to be back.
Awesome. And I'm Joe Hotagwa, founder of Authentic African Media. We help people visit, move, and invest in Africa. We also spend time sharing the stories of the day across the continent. We do this live stream weekly on Thursdays. We have a semi-regular Sunday live stream where we talk about news specifically in Sierra Leone. And then we also do a live stream about Ghana every other week. And then I do a Pan-African news or Pan-African perspectives live stream on the alternating weeks on Mondays. And that is to help people understand what's happening at the countries that they're thinking about visiting, moving, and or investing in. And so with that, let's get into today's stories. In the interest of time, we'll jump right into it, but I'll just say this, there's obviously a fast-moving outbreak in the DRC right now, and this strain of Ebola has gotten more than 80 people to experience loss of life. And it's reached the major city of Goma, which now is under siege by the M23 rebels. So this is the number of loss of life has prompted the World Health Organization to declare an international health emergency. So we're going to hear more again from this African news story, and then we will give some commentary on the other side.
Who died in Bunia, and this woman came to Goma, developed symptoms, and her test came back positive.
Et le test a été positif.
Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said on Saturday that 88 deaths and 336 suspected Ebola cases have been reported so far in the outbreak.
C'est une épidémie qui
It is an epidemic that will spread very rapidly, all the more so as it has broken out in a densely populated province with a high concentration of people and a great deal of population movement. And then, of course, there is the added complication that there are many armed groups in this province. That is what will make managing this epidemic very, very complicated.
très, très, très compliqué.
Officials said Saturday the Ebola strain first identified in 2007 has killed a Congolese national in neighboring Uganda.
Gloria, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, really, really sad. Of course, unfortunately, this isn't the first time we'll be talking about about Ebola in the DRC. I think sometime last year we talked about it, and I even went into the history and all that, and I guess I'll do that again and try to be as quick as possible. But the DRC is actually one country that's had painful relationships with disease outbreak of any country on earth. It has one of the most painful relationships with disease outbreak. And that tells you everything you need to know. And of course, here's why it keeps happening, because it's very important that we know, because again, we talked about it last year. Every now and then you have this outbreak and it's catastrophic and very scary. The DRC is the second largest country in Africa by landmass. It's roughly the size of Western Europe. It has a population of over 100 million people. And these people are spread across dense rainforests. They have river systems. They have territories that are among the most difficult to access on Earth. And of course, it shares borders with 9 countries, more than any African nation. And we know about the elephant in the room, the continuous armed conflict that keeps happening in its eastern provinces. This has been happening since the mid-1990s. This conflict is part of the reason that Ebola keeps happening there and why it keeps being so difficult to contain. The Ebola virus was first identified way before that, 1976, in Zaire, in what is now DRC, near what you call the Ebola River. And even though there was an outbreak in Sudan, unfortunately, because of this geography that I've described, and just that gives you an idea of how the DRC is situated and why it keeps getting this attack. And they named the virus after the river. So it's really sad. I think what hurts me the most is the fact that the Ebola virus is now almost being associated with Congo. And it's just really, really unfortunate. I mean, Congo has a lot it's already dealing with. And then to add this to it, it's just a lot of complications. And hopefully Congo gets free in every way. And I do believe, and this is why we keep saying justice for Congo, free Congo. Once there's freedom, to a large extent, I think they'll be able to better contain this outbreak that keeps resurfacing. You're on mute.
Sorry, some
okay.
construction happening in the background. So as you mentioned, there are so many countries bordering the DRC, and that's why this has been considered a global health emergency, because people traveling in and out of country there, and I think one of the things to keep in mind is a epidemic like this gets exacerbated by the fact that you have so many people that are unhoused and displaced because of the many different conflicts that are happening within country, right? So you have people that are in densely populated areas, in these encampments where it can spread very quickly amongst people. Not to mention the folks who are able to work on sustaining and treating it are some of those displaced people. And when you talk about major cities where now you have these insurgent groups, or really what I would say like terrorist groups taking them over, it makes it very difficult for those who come in to help. And then the other thing is, for years, there's always been a global system in place to try to suppress the Ebola virus. Whatever you guys believe out there, whether you believe in it or not, there were systems in place. With the onset of Doge, you guys might remember it. It was one of the many things that happened with this administration over the last year. They let go of so many different people who are responsible for tracing and implementing systems and communicating with people in terms of what they can do to protect themselves and even treatment. Much of that assistance and cooperation is no longer in existence. And so that also impacts things greatly. And that's how you get to a place where 88 have experienced loss of life. So it is one issue exacerbated by another. We'll continue to watch it, and we hope that it does end up getting sustained and contained. But I wouldn't be surprised if this number increases considering the circumstances on the ground. So, we'll continue to watch and keep an eye out on this. So with that, we are going to jump into the next story, and that is at the 2026 Africa CEO Forum in Kigali, Rwanda. Rwandan President Paul Kagame delivered a critique of the global superpowers, accusing them of stripping Africa of its economic sovereignty, highlighting that the continent hosts 60% of the world's solar potential and a vast majority of critical minerals needed to continue with the green energy revolution. But Kagame urged African nations to halt the cheap export of raw materials and instead prioritize domestic processing. It's a conversation we've been having a lot here on platform. And so we're going to hear from the folks at First Post Africa, and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Our story now, Rwandan President Paul Kagame has issued a stern warning to African nations. Stop letting global superpowers rip you off. Speaking at the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali, Kagame has urged African nations to finally leverage their own wealth. He says it is time to say no to partnerships that strip the region of its economic sovereignty. Paul Kagame says that Africa has been silent for too long, and he claims the continent is losing its resources cheaply to those who have the power and know what they want.
I'll leave it there. You might notice when they pan to the audience, how many Africans did you see? But anyway, Gloria, your thoughts on what Kagame said at this CEO forum. I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to just point that out as, because it's important to see that. But your thoughts, Gloria, on this, on what Kagame said.
Yeah. And, there are people who will have issue with the messenger and say, should you be the one talking about this? There's certain, because we have seen some partnerships with the West, when in certain regards, and we've analyzed certain things such as the third party, deportation of migrants and things like that. To an extent, that is partnership with the West. And, we questioned we have questions around the sovereignty and dignity of the countries that they keep bringing these migrants to. But, and then obviously there'll be conversations around what's happening in the DRC and things like that. But if we're focusing on the message, I absolutely agree. We've always talked about sovereignty. We've always talked about African countries, looking to themselves. And I think this is a really well-timed message, obviously because of what happened with France coming to visit Kenya and all the noise and drama that came with that visit. And then you're having people, obviously like William Ruto, even a known businessman in Nigeria, Tony Elumelu, who I saw a video on, and I have an analysis on that coming up this week, but actually talked about how we should forget the past and let's forge forward, So yeah, so I appreciate a message like this. And that is the same message we've all been saying. And it is because of the history of our continent that we need to be more aware. Sovereignty of our continent is key to our freedom because Africa is not truly free. So I am completely with Kagame on that. I do agree that African leaders should look to themselves and get that sovereignty. And for the record, when we're speaking historically, when Rwanda was going through what it was going through back then in 1994, the United Nations, France, Belgium, the US chose not to intervene. So to an extent, Rwanda does have the moral authority to give that message.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point about, some people being worried about the messenger, yes, third party third-party migrant deals, other deals, health deals, etc. And then, of course, the accusations of being involved with the M23 rebels in the DRC, right? I think all of those lead to people saying that they don't like the messenger. However, the message is important, and the message does need to come from Africa. And, you know, I think, you know, that's one of those things where it's tough, right? Because of all the things I just said. But the most important thing is what was said. And what was said was Africa needs to stop being taken advantage of. Africa needs to begin the process of refining those resources in country, and not just sending out the raw materials. Because unfortunately, the raw materials themselves don't have as much value as when they're refined and into something else. They have different use cases. And so Africans are losing in two ways. One, because raw materials don't generate as much revenue as they should. And so Africans selling those, but they're also selling them at discounted rates, right? So you're selling raw materials that you can generate more revenue for your country and for your people. Whichever country we're talking about, and in whatever particular instance we mean, and that, you know, that's uranium, that's gold, that's copper, that's you know,
Cobalt,
you know, diamonds, whatever, right? Many times the raw materials, oil, right? The raw materials are sent elsewhere and refined. So yeah, I think what's really important is to those things that we've been talking about here, and seeing Africa actually bring that in-house and do more trading internally, and also refining these things internally. So with that, I mean, look, it's an important message, but, you know, obviously people take issue with the messenger, but don't lose sight of the message because it's still very important.
yes.
All right, so now with that, next we are moving to Nigeria, which actually, as we've talked about before,
Nigeria is escalating.
As we talked about before, they've had some jihadist militants. Some say tied to ISIS, some say tied to Al Qaeda, and they had joint U.S. strikes hit militants after the 46 kidnapped in school raids recently. So Nigeria continues to battle both jihadist insurgents in the northeast and what they call criminal gangs known as bandits, who frequently target rural communities and schools for ransom. And so there was a bombing raid that happened recently. So we'll play this story from African News and have some commentary on the other side.
Nigeria is escalating military pressure on armed groups even as insecurity continues to spread across the country. In the northeast, Nigeria and the United States carried out fresh airstrikes against Islamic State-linked militants on Sunday. According to United States Africa Command, the Nigerian defense officials, the coordinated operation killed at least 20 fighters in ongoing efforts to dismantle the network. Authorities say the strikes are part of a broader campaign following earlier joint operations targeting senior jihadist figures. Meanwhile, in Southwest, the Christian Association of Nigeria reported that 46 people, mostly children, were kidnapped in coordinated attacks on 3 schools in Oyo State. Armed gunmen stormed multiple schools, abducting pupils and staff in a wave of violence that forced temporary closures before schools were later ordered to reopen. Nigeria continues to battle both jihadist insurgents in the northeast and criminal gangs known as bandits, who frequently target rural communities and schools for ransom.
All right, so Gloria, your thoughts? Oh,
Yeah, so Trump actually described this man, al-Manuki, as the second in command of ISIS globally. Well, analysts are saying that this is actually off the mark. They're saying al-Manuki was actually the deputy of a man known as Abu Musab al-Barnawi, who was the leader of the Islamic State West Africa province and was reported to have been unalived in 2021. And this is, Nigerians are also, as far as Nigerians are concerned, they're very concerned about the fact that this particular person, this Al-Minuki person, has been claimed. They claimed to unalive him prior. So people are really confused. Like, okay, what is the deal? Was he unalive? What is the U.S. talking about? And the U.S. actually made the announcement before the Nigerian government came in. So yeah, all that has actually been very confusing, and we don't even know what in the world is going on. But anyway, the fact that the operation itself happened, reportedly it did happen, has been confirmed, and the Nigerian government has basically come out in what looks like a partnership with the U.S. Obviously, we know that this partnership has been ongoing since the U.S. had its boots on the ground, and them confirming this, I guess, does solidify the fact that this is indeed a partnership. There's a lot also happening in Nigeria. While this looks like a great move forward, things are happening. These terrorists have gone into the Southwest. Just recently at a school, teachers, the principal, they were all taken. I mean, children were from a school. Children were taken. A teacher was unalived. And it was recorded, and that video was circulating everywhere. So while we have the U.S. in Nigeria, and we appreciate whatever all this stuff is, great optics, as far as from a global perspective, but we still have this terrorism happening. People are not feeling safe anymore. It's now no longer just the North. Now they've gone into the Southwest, and that's close to. But this one I told you about happened in Oyo State. Oyo State is close to Lagos State. So it's really scary what's going on now. And we hope this so-called partnership yields fruit and this terrorism eventually can be stopped.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. I mean, I don't know, I'm of two minds on this. I'd love to have seen Nigeria partner with their countries to the north on something like this. Obviously, we saw recently that Niger and Burkina Faso had joint airstrikes in Mali against those jihadist groups in Mali. And so and it looks like they've been able to push people back. They've been able to, arrest a significant number of these terrorist groups and terrorist cells. And so there's been some success with those folks. And so it always comes back to, why doesn't Nigeria work with these folks to do this? Because I think, you're talking about neighboring countries, right? Niger's to the north, Burkina Faso and Mali are to the west, but they're all there in the same region, right? Especially because most of this was happening in northern Nigeria. You would anticipate that you'd work with your people who border you to the north to kind of help temper these attacks. In any case, it is scary that it's traveling to other parts of the country, as you stated. These bandits, they're calling them, nearing to Lagos State. So, we'll definitely keep an eye on it, and let's hope that they can continue to stop these guys. Fingers crossed. I don't know where the intelligence is coming from or the military apparatus, but I'm just hoping that they're able to stop it sooner than later, because this is it's only gotten worse, and there hadn't been enough done. I think this is the first time I'm hearing in a while that Nigeria has actually done something themselves. I mean, obviously at this scale, right? Obviously there was a bombing on Christmas Day last year. The United States did, but this level of aggression is new and different than what we had seen before. So somebody's asking the question, wasn't the Nigerian military able to quell some uprising in Benin and Togo, but they can't take care of their own backyard? 12,000-pound bomb incoming.
Thank you. Great, very valid question.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes you wonder what incentives are there to not do anything, right?
Yeah. Because this unaliving that I told you about with the teacher happened. Yeah. It was so gruesome. I can't even describe it to you. I didn't watch the video, but apparently that video circulated. There's no form of intelligence. However, it's so quick for them to arrest people who speak up for the military, for instance, as was the case with Justice Crack recently. He's been granted bail, by the way. The point I'm making is there's excess intelligence, as we saw with what happened in Benin. But when it comes to safeguarding people, suddenly we have no intelligence for that. These people are so brazen. They're recording and putting online because they know there's nothing you're going to do. In fact, they're daring you to do something.
All good points. So now with that, more with the U.S., because obviously this was a joint operation in Nigeria with the U.S. The U.S. is now seeking to reestablish ties with countries in the Sahel region. Top military officials on Thursday of last week warned a Senate committee that what extremist groups had expanded their operational capacity in the region, and they're looking to expand their relationships there. So we're going to talk about this in a second, but let's take the story from Africa News, and we'll have some more commentary on the other side.
After years of sidelining the Sahel's military rulers, the United States is moving to engage more with countries in the region. Top military officials warned a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on Thursday that extremist groups had expanded their operational capacity.
Today, the epicenter of global terrorism is in Africa. ISIS leadership is African. Al-Qaeda's economic engine is in Africa. Both of these groups share the will and intent to strike our homeland. In West Africa, Al-Qaeda affiliate JNIM has demonstrated increased capacity to control key terrain in the Sahel, most notably by strangling fuel supplies around population centers. The capture of a capital city would provide Al-Qaeda with all the trappings of a nation state to sponsor global terrorism.
Anderson went on to praise collaboration with Nigeria following US airstrikes on an Islamic State-affiliated group in that country in December last year.
We've also been working very closely with Nigeria, who has in the last few months opened up with a very positive engagement with intel sharing and ability to go after and target some of these terrorist threats that are in northern Nigeria. And so that has been a positive area that we've seen as well. We would like to reestablish some pragmatic relationships in the Sahel, where ISIS also has a stronghold, where they are currently holding an American hostage.
Sahel states have been fighting jihadist groups for more than a decade with limited success. But some analysts suggest Washington's plans to restore cooperation is as much about security as it is about gaining access to the region's minerals.
As it is about getting access to the region's minerals. That's where they ended that video. So your thoughts, Gloria, on all of this?
That part. So let me go back to that statement he made about Nigeria and all the success they've had. This goes back to the point I made in our previous analysis or the previous video we watched. Bro, there's still a lot of terrorism in Nigeria. So don't make it seem as if there's been all this success. You know, there are headlines, all this sensationalizing and all these beautiful optics. I get it, but it's still very unsafe in Nigeria. So could we please not use that as a reason for you to now, suddenly want to do the same thing in the Sahel? And I also want us to get to the root of the problem. There are a lot of allegations out there and reports that point to certain countries in the West having something to do with what's going on in the Sahel. Mm-hmm. So the solution, y'all don't think we forgot. It was around this time last year, the world stood up for Ibrahim Traore and the entire Sahel region and asked you to leave Africa alone. And now you're coming back cap in hand, like it's okay to be like, man, our bad. Could you pretty please give us some access? Let's see if we can work together. I'm not even sure at this point there's any trust there. I think you've done enough, and the Sahel seems to be handling what they're handling just fine. Thank you very much. But I don't think there's trust, definitely not among the people, because y'all didn't, just because you've rebranded and brought another face to the whole picture, you think, and that Nigeria is partnering with you. I mean, we're not surprised about that. We expected that. So don't come trying to act like, it's in a sense dismissive of everything that's happened. There's no accountability for what they did and how disrespectful they were. You made a threat. Langley made a threat as it were. And people stood up and said no. And then you're going to just come back and ask, you're asking us to, do you really want to help us, or you want the minerals as they asked?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, Michael Langley was the person who would have been sitting in that seat this time last year when he made the statement about Ibrahim Traore, which led to all of those protests around the world in support of Ibrahim Traore. So yeah, good point. New face, same message. Well, slightly different message. Now the message is we need to get in here. So, you know, look, I really wish that last statement wasn't one that I think we all believe to be true about the minerals, right? But we just know this as a historical fact. Western countries do not get involved in other countries unless there is a mineral advantage for doing so. We just don't. And, you know, we do get involved in other countries sometimes. And when I say we, I mean the West, because that's where I spend, you know, more than half of my time, do get involved in countries where there's a material benefit only. So that's what we're seeing here, in my opinion. And I think that's what they were saying in this video about what analysts think. That's just how it works. And it's how it's always been. And so we can't expect any different. You know, with that, there's little time left. So maybe we can run off a few headlines that we didn't get a chance to cover today. So one is that the U.S. plans a major expansion of Afrikaner refugee admissions to the United States after obviously having all those bans on different African countries for visas. And they're talking about removing temporary protective status for many different countries, including Haiti and a few others, but increasing refugee status from Afrikaners, which are, if you guys aren't familiar, these are people of Dutch descent living in South Africa, who are now continuing to get refugee status in the United States. Your thoughts on this as we run through the rest of the headlines?
No surprise.
No surprise at all. So a couple other things. Ghana concludes its IMF bailout. Reported on this on Monday. They had gone through 17 or 18 different bailouts through the International Monetary Fund, right? Isn't that what its IMF stands for? Mm-hmm. And this last time, they basically were told, or it was determined that they don't require another bailout. There's a different framework for the deal they're going to do with the IMF, but there's not another bailout required because of the improvements that the current administration and potentially the former administration have made in Ghana. Any thoughts on them no longer needing another bailout in particular with the IMF?
That's what we're hoping for. Shout out to Namibia, clearing their debt with the IMF, and any country that's able to stand. My country is borrowing from the World Bank, by the way, but I think you'll get to that. But yeah, thank you. But yeah, why are we in debt? What did Thomas Sankara say about owing, you know? It's never going to favor us, ever.
Right. Few more quick notes. When it comes to, so Ethiopia and Dangote have a recent collaboration, Dangote. Any thoughts on his expansion to Ethiopia?
Okay, maybe I should, if you don't mind, I want to quickly complete my thought on what I just said. Sure. I thought we'll get to it, but I don't think we'll have a chance to. Nigeria is borrowing from the World Bank, over $1 billion from the World Bank. And when Nigerians went to the comments section of the World Bank to tell them, please, we don't want any more money because we know our generations are going to pay that money. You know what the World Bank did? They closed their comments section. Yes. So that's when right. I say we're still borrowing, I'm talking about Nigeria. Nigeria is still busy borrowing. But anyway, what was it? Okay, Ethiopia, Dangote. Yeah, see, collaborations can actually happen within the continent. These are the kinds of things we love to see. Partnership within the continent. You don't have to go outside. We have people like Dangote who have money. And will, they have enough. Well, countries have money for even removing individuals from it. So it's very possible. And here's the proof.
Yeah. Okay. And then any thoughts on Togo on the visa-free border operations?
Yet another thing we'd love to see throughout the continent. If we're talking about sovereignty, if we're talking about unity, we need unity, because as we know, there's a lot of tension throughout the continent right now. These borders have done far more harm than good. So yes, thank you, Togo. Yay. Shout out Togo. We want more.
Yes, absolutely. And so the story about Ashley Robinson, aka Ashley Janae, was the U.S. social media influencer who experienced loss of life in Tanzania. The video we had spoken about, the story we had spoken about some weeks ago, and I'm thinking it's her video, right? That was recently found, where I think it was definitely the Ashley Janae story, right? It was the Ashley Robinson story. Yeah. So we had talked about she had just recently got engaged on her 30th birthday in Tanzania to someone of European descent. And obviously he had some relationship with the hotel. And, for some reason, the investigation seemed to be stalled a bit. It said that she self-deleted. And I think there was a lot of questions about whether or not that would have happened. Her family obviously disputed that. We're asking for answers. They weren't given any answers. And some video has surfaced this week from the hotel with her running from him. And it was like something out of a movie, like a horror movie. So it doesn't seem like somebody running like that is running to self-delete, put it that way. So, I think that's the latest update. We didn't have time to go through it today. We will probably maybe do a deeper dive on another discussion and play the video for you guys maybe next week. But just something to think about, that how long did it take, and only this viral moment will probably potentially bring some justice, hopefully, because without it, the excuse was she self-deleted, which I don't think anybody believed. Any thoughts on this?
Just really creepy. That video was just creepy, and he was naked.
Yeah,
it was really strange, and scary. And it's like, where was the security the whole time? For a hotel of that level, I mean, obviously bad business for them in general, this whole story, but a hotel of that level, operating at that level, had no security, nobody. Okay, so they separated them, and I'm guessing that happened after the fact, maybe shortly before the deletion happened. It's just really sad and creepy. Please, everyone, be safe out there. And to those saying she deserved it and all, I get your perspectives on it, but at the end of the day, she did not deserve to be unalived that way. Not cool. She didn't deserve to be unalived at all.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that they're conflating a couple different things in those discussions, right? People saying that people who select are different ethnic groups than their own, because they say their own ethnic group is too violent, et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of people are attributing many people's conversations to her. Yeah. I don't know where she said anything specifically like that, but I think that when something like this happens, because of how she was showing off her relationship, I think that is where people are conflating these two conversations. But as you said, nobody deserves to experience loss of life in that way.
I mean, there were some tweets that, brought up that seemed, especially maybe saying things about Black men that weren't so flattering. So those kinds of tweets from the past made it seem like, okay, so you were aspiring. There's a cult of certain women who will tell you, don't feel inclined to date within your race if it's going to help you get a soft life. So it's like some kind of a thing that this group of people do. And that's why I think people had issue with it. But I think that can be separated from the fact that she definitely, absolutely deserves justice.
Right. Yes. And to your point, yes, there was a lot of discussion about soft life and who can give you a soft life. Yes, for sure. And so, yeah, I think that that's where people are, conflating that discussion and others with why she deserves it, right? Which I don't think I can agree with anybody deserving that kind of ending to a life. So with that being said, we will leave it there. Any final words for the folks watching?
Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, share. Follow Joe, Authentic African. Follow me, the Gloria Ayo, at Diaspora Station. We appreciate you and see you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you all next week. Bye.
Adios.